So the University of Stirling welcomes you all to this 4th International Bridge Conference. We're delighted that we have over 470 delegates attending this week from 59 countries. This conference series was set up by Marek Malwisa, founder of the World Bridge Federation's Bridge and Science Committee. The first two were organised by Marek in Poland in 2017 and 2018, and the third was in Croatia in 2019, organised by Tihana Brklajic. Bridge, a mind sport for all, BAMSA for short, has organised this one online. We have more than 70 presenters and panellists from 20 countries, all contributing to the programme. So the BAMSA network has enabled this to happen. Collaboration and partnership working are key. We're grateful to the American Contract Bridge League Educational Foundation, the Scottish Bridge Union, the Leisure Studies Association, and the University of Stirling for their funding. With their support, we're able to translate our conference into a useful resource for the global bridge community. So during these 4 days, we will use theoretical discussions to illustrate academic thinking and conceptual frameworks that can help us understand and analyse bridge through an interdisciplinary academic lens. Our academic contributors come from a variety of backgrounds, including sociology, psychology, sports studies, health sciences, global studies, social work, and leisure studies. In terms of practice and policy in the world of bridge, we have local, regional, national, and international bridge organisations that are all represented. Practitioners include bridge teachers, clubs, and players. And bridge policymakers include both NBOs and IBOs, so international and national bridge organisations. The aim of this conference is to bridge these two worlds, to encourage greater dialogue in order to tackle some of the key challenges that we all face: attracting more younger players, marketing bridge in new ways, and shifting the negative images of bridge. We won't solve these long-standing issues at one conference, but we do aim to provide a lively environment where we can share ideas, review good practice, and consider potential solutions. That dialogue's not always going to be straightforward, as both worlds have their own language, and sometimes that language is inaccessible to those outside our own community. Nevertheless, I think we're going to have some fruitful discussions. The good work will take time, but in the end, we will get to see tangible outputs. And we hope that using an academic lens will shed light, a new light perhaps, on some of these issues. So the conference title is Bridging Academia, Policy and Practice. So it's these three worlds that we want to bring together. We're currently working to involve non-bridge policymakers to get bridge into government agendas such as mental health, social isolation and loneliness. Anyone with contacts in that area, do please let us know. This conference then will address such wider policy concerns. By bringing together academics, bridge practitioners and policymakers, we hope to push the boundaries of our thinking in terms of what's possible for the future. For example, we might consider whether it's even always feasible to bring together these three worlds. At what points and in what situations is the academic voice absent? Where might an academic lens be needed more and where not? And do bridge practitioners think that academic concepts are useful to the world of bridge? And if so, in what ways? Or if not, why not? So a key aim of the conference then is to inspire the bridge community to promote bridge more widely in society, getting bridge and mind sport on the map beyond our bridge world. As these three worlds of academia, policy and practice come together, we will raise awareness about the benefits of mind sport for mental health, education and community connection. And that's why most of us are here today. You'll be from at least one or more of these worlds, and participants include around a third academics and 2/3 bridge players. So many of the themes that we explore together this week do include complex social problems that aren't just our problems in the bridge world, such as sexism and cheating. But one thing's clear, collaborating both within and across these worlds will enable a fresh perspective for some of the challenges we face. So turning more specifically then to this morning's session, we're focusing today on mind sports in academia and society. We're going to begin with 2 live presentations with a short Q&A after each, and then we will have a more general panel discussion. So a summary is available for each research presentation, and you can download the book of abstracts and the full programme from the main conference webpage. So all the panelists have prepared videos which are on the website for this session, and we do hope that for each session you attend this week, you will listen to the pre-recordings beforehand, because the live discussions will build on them. Most are around just 10 minutes long, and there tends to be 4 or 5 for each session. In total, there's 35 recordings from experts around the world, and we do hope this is a useful resource, not just for this week, but also for future use. Just a few housekeeping things. Session recordings and presentations, along with the conference reports, will be on our website. We encourage all of you to use the chat for both questions and comments. If you can, remember, put a Q next to a question and tell us if it's for a specific panelist. We might not verbally answer all the questions, but many of the presenters have said they're very happy to type answers to you if you direct a question specifically at them. So even if we don't get through all the questions, either verbally or in the chat, they will still help to frame BAMS's ongoing research, and they will appear in the conference reports. Some of you will be familiar with chat or the polls that we use, but Teams does work in different ways for different users. It's a new world for all of us, and it's certainly the first time that the Bridge world has attempted anything like this, so it's going to be an exciting week. We also recommend that non-native English speakers turn on the live captions, but not everyone will have those functions, so there's further guidance again on our website. And finally, a big thank you to all the presenters this week and to all of those who've prepared advanced materials. The videos provide excellent insights into what's happening in different parts of the world. Now I have great pleasure in introducing the President of the World Bridge Federation, Gianariego Rona, who will be giving the opening address.
Thank you. Dear all, dear friends, everywhere you are, good afternoon. I am very pleased to be here with you, being kindly invited, and I am glad to thank the organizer for this opportunity given to me, and to congratulate them, the University of Stirling, and in particular my dear friend, Professor Samantha Punch, the real deus of machina of this initiative. They've made a great job, and I wish them a great success, as they have already achieved in their fundamental research about the benefic effects of bridge. Bridge, as you know, is the most widespread card game in the world and counts a number of players larger than of any other game. The reason for this success is linked to the fact that bridge is a universal game that can be played by anyone, anywhere, in the same language and at the same technique, without particular tools, since all you need are just 4 people and a deck of cards. The cards represent a unique case in the field of games, only the instrument needed to carry out tactics, and do not constitute a fundamental element of the game. Today, you very well know, with the modern technology, the game is normally and usually played also without cards, at a distance, with a simple computer and 4 players in different places everywhere in the world. We love to say that bridge is hobby, sport, and culture. Hobby, obviously, because it represents a recreational pastime, a game in the most complete sense of the word. Sport. Bridge is a sport, fully recognized by the IOC since 1994, and has been already proudly included in the Olympic Asian Games together with all the other sports since 2018. Bridge represents an irreplaceable workout for exercising the brain And it is probably for this reason that is defined as the ultimate sport of the mind. But it is not only a sport for a brain. It requires particular concentration, fighting spirit, quick reflexes, and stamina, qualities only achieved through physical fitness. It should be highlighted also that in the important competition that require practicing 10, 12 hours a day for 10 or 15 consecutive days, the stress is not just psychological, and the aptitude to effort and resilience must be reviewed under a purely physical perspective. Culture now. We are very proud of this appellation. Bridge is substantially about socialization and aggregation, since its fundamental nucleus is composed firstly by the couple and then by the four players. Bridge is different to other mind sports like chess, in which the ultimate objective is to defeat the adversary, to beat the other, a war game in other words. With bridge instead, the most important element is the mutual understanding existing with the partner, and therefore it's about communication, harmony, solidarity above all. Bridge promotes the most unimaginable socialization between people of different age, sex, class, education, culture, and characteristics. Bridge is regulated by ethical and practical rules, the respect of which represent the main aim of the game, and this aspect, especially for the younger players, is of considerable educational value. Regarding young players, Bridge is able to offer a consistent help in refining their analytical skills in a moment of fundamental importance on their formation, and to perfect, through constant verification, their ability to synthesize. One finds oneself in the best condition for feeling strong, determined, and ready to face life and its many and varied challenges. Bridge is intrinsically effective in bringing out the best qualities in young players. It will help them to patiently accept the negative events and correct or eliminate all that can hinder, or even just slow down their success. The experience of teaching Bridge School has given extraordinary results, enabling the social reintegration of kids who were particularly introvert, unresponsive to any commitment, unyielding to any socializing initiative. Bridge is undoubtedly a discipline that can be indulged by in people with disabilities on a par with anyone else, without problems of any nature, without the need of particular alchemists, without the limitation of architectural barriers that have aroused so much discussion. People with disabilities measure themselves on a par with the fully able and do not feel disheartened by their condition, and above all, they can practice a discipline also at competitive level without being isolated and marginalized, together with their unfortunate peers. Finally, for the elderly, Bridge represents an opportunity to exercise their mental skills, often destined to diminish with retirement and the progressive lack of direct interest. But, above all, it offers the opportunity to be in contact with younger people, to talk with them, to be involved in their problem, to speak their language, to somehow feel similar to them, to overcome the terrible feeling of oppression, which is the direct consequence of feeling out of the game. Specific studies have highlighted how elderly people who play bridge have greater mnemonic and intellectual skills than those who don't play. Moreover, various scientific researches carried out, and in particular that by the Stirling University, which is a fundamental theme of this meeting, revealed extraordinary results. Playing bridge helps to produce more T-type lymphoid cells and therefore strengthens the immune system, which is what protects the body from harmful microorganisms. Let me now conclude saying that since June 2001, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan, contacted the WBF President José Damiani to explore ways in which the United Nations and the world of sport can work more closely together for the benefit of peoples everywhere, and particularly for the world youth, in order to identify tasks, programs, and new initiatives that may benefit from collaboration between the United Nations and the World Bridge Federation. I hope not to have bored you too much. Thank you for the attention and good work.
Thank you, Gianriego. You've given a great introduction there to many of the themes that we're going to be touching on this week, and we really do appreciate the support of the World Bridge Federation for this social research. Before we move on to the next presentation, I'm just going to do a quick poll. Some of you will be familiar with these polls. If you see it appear on your screen, can you please vote and submit your answer? You may find it in the chat function if it doesn't appear in the middle of your screen. So if you could be voting, and for some of you who are on certain browsers, you might not be able to see it at all. But if you can put your vote in, if you can see it, that would be great. The question is, do you have a good understanding of the term mind sport? So obviously, we're all here today to discuss this topic, so it's unsurprising that there's a high number of votes for people that do understand the term mind sport. And that's because most of you are either bridge players or academics, but we would expect the term to be much less known outside of our own communities. So I'm now just going to move into the presentation, the overview of BAMSA work. So the limited knowledge of mind sport is one of the reasons for the existence of the project Bridge a Mind Sport for All. BAMSA is hosted in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Stirling. There's lots of academic work on chess, but very little social research on bridge. Chess is played much more in schools because the research evidence shows why it should be taken seriously. That's not the same with bridge. Bridge offers the cognitive aspects of mind sport as well as the more social ones. And because it's played in partnership, it requires both communication skills as well as analytical skills. BAMSA's goal is to get bridge more widely recognised as a mind sport, both in academia and in wider society. Our panel discussion today will pick up on the ways that a mind sport can be conceptualised and the extent to which it might also be considered a sport. So introducing the main BAMSA team, you'll meet them this week. All are part-time, carrying out specific research activities, which means that although we look like a big team, altogether the researchers add up to one full-time person. Added to that, we have fantastic volunteers and collaborators around the world, and that really enables us to expand our capacity. We're applying for research funding for future projects, so we hope to grow. The composition of the team is varied. Christina and I are the only two bridge players, and the others are sociologists who bring fresh insights to our understanding of bridge, since they often question things that we as bridge players might take for granted. Our work with international and interdisciplinary research associates has already enabled us to expand our network of resources. Bridge a Mind Sport for All has three aims. First is the need to work on transforming the image of bridge, and a key way of doing that is by framing it as a mind sport rather than just a game. The word mind sport makes people pay more attention. Until now, academics have found that bridge isn't considered worthy of investing research money or time. Our project has worked hard to get people to pay attention to mind sport and see the wider relevance of bridge to a range of issues in society: mental health, community cohesion, development of life skills, etc. And we'll see all of these themes discussed this week. The second aim is to increase the numbers of people playing, and the third is to ensure that the game continues to thrive. Underpinning all of this is the wider goal of getting bridge to be taken seriously as a mind sport. Turning now to the different components of BAMS's work. Launched earlier this year, our website is a free resource that houses our research. I'll talk you through the key parts of the website. Research is at the centre of what we do. It's also what makes us different from any other bridge organisation, as we offer the academic side of understanding what goes on in the bridge world. It includes the benefits of Mindsport that we'll discuss today, as well as the darker sides of the game, such as cheating that's on tomorrow's agenda. As academics, we don't shy away from the difficult and challenging issues. Our resources are for teachers, parents, pupils, schools, employers and policymakers. All the audio-visual materials and the videos, etc. on our website can all be freely used. Just please acknowledge BAMSA as the source and do let us know how you use them. The global BAMSA network is steadily growing, and in particular, we're keen to hear about ideas for future research. The University of Stirling's motto is "Be the Difference," and the end goal of BAMSA is to make an impact by raising awareness of bridge as a mind sport and leading to more tangible change. So the research area on our website is where you can find a project overview for our 8 studies. Each project's current status is there and information about methods and outputs. This includes peer-reviewed academic articles, and each paper has an accessible summary. And in that summary, we clearly explain what the evidence is in that academic paper and how it might be used by bridge organisations. Working across disciplines is important to us. A great example of this is our newest project, Bridging Insights, a collaboration with those who have expertise in psychology and marketing. And together we're developing a marketing campaign to target bridge to different social groups. Do watch the Thinking Outside the Bidding Box video before you participate directly in this research project in the final session of the conference this Thursday. So all of these studies directly relate to each of the conference sessions this week. So for example, Bridging Wellbeing links to this afternoon's keynote with Professor Martin Seligman. Our Bridging COVID project is about the impacts of COVID-19 on the bridge world, and that's the focus of sessions 2A and 2B tomorrow. So in particular, the forced shift to electronic bridge, and that has both good and bad outcomes, as we shall see. It also captures the positive pandemic story of the link between bridge, ageing well, and community cohesion, and that's going to be discussed in session 3A on Wednesday. The Bridging Gender project, in the second session on Wednesday, there's going to be some lively discussion around sexism and the women's game. The Bridging School work was funded by the Davenport Fund, but has had to be postponed due to COVID. We're hoping to restart soon, interviewing pupils, parents and teachers. Session 4A on Thursday links directly to this work stream. It explores what helps and hinders learning bridge. We're also looking at youth bridge and the ways that bridge connects families and intergenerationality, discussed again on Wednesday. Finally, our longer term academic aim is to develop mind sports studies as a new academic field, something that doesn't currently exist, but it's likely to be situated somewhere between leisure studies and sports studies, and I'm excited to hear what today's panel will say about this. Also, BAMS is currently developing a new undergraduate module on the sociology of mind sport. So as this tour of BAMS's research shows, the discussions and interactions that we'll have this week directly shape our ongoing work. So where did the research start? A few years ago, we began with 52 in-depth interviews with elite players, and this became the Bridging Minds project. Many people outside the bridge community are unaware that such a world exists, where people play international tournaments representing their countries. And as we'll see in the book launch this afternoon, or well, it might not be afternoon for all of you, so later today, the experiences of elite players show a very different side to bridge, and the evidence will help to dispel the stereotypical images of the game. The second academic paper here, Playing Your Life, shows how players develop transferable life skills at the bridge table, such as empathy and cooperation, by working on their partnership interactions. So our published papers from this project cover themes such as partnership and team dynamics, identity, life skills, motivations, and gender. And with papers coming out later this year on the professionalisation of bridge and emotions in bridge. And the next presentation by David Scott is also based on data from this elite social world, viewed from the perspective of sports studies. But as you've seen, whilst our project has explored the dynamics of bridge at the top, our more recent research focuses on bridge that's played at all levels. So how do we work and what's ahead? BAMSA has various overlapping phases of work planned for the next few years. The research phase, as we've seen, is about conducting research, publishing academic papers and disseminating the findings. The resources phase involves working with bridge stakeholders, like many of you, to co-produce accessible materials targeted at various audiences. The network phase will develop and consolidate a global Bridge and Mindsport for All network to share best practice and ensure effective use of academic research within the bridge community. This conference and the current assets on the conference web pages are an example of that. We're seeking then a two-way dialogue, so do please share your views via the chat function. The impact phase is about BAMSA working with the wider bridge community to co-develop solutions for sustaining bridge in the longer term. We're looking for behaviour and policy change, but this is a long process, so we have staged goals. All these initiatives overlap, but building up the BAMSA network has taken centre stage. We need to work with you as stakeholders to ensure that our outputs are relevant and useful. So thus, BAMSA is keen to work collaboratively with bridge organisations and practitioners, like many of you, to achieve these outcomes. Each of these objectives will be explored in the conference session this week, starting today with some of the social and health benefits of bridge. By working with our global partners, our ultimate mission is to get bridge widely recognised in national agendas for combating social isolation and loneliness. The inputs from all of you this week are going to help frame the research journey that BAMSA undertakes for the next 3 to 5 years. So please don't hold back and put your comments and suggestions into the chat throughout all the conference sessions. So finally then, we demonstrate the collaborative nature of BAMSA. On the top row, our international partners, the second row, the UK and Ireland partners, the third row at the national bridge organisations that supported us and our collaborators. All of these have contributed funding. We thank you once again. Donations have also come from bridge clubs and bridge players around the world. BAMSA is a charitable project, so if you're ever fundraising for a good cause, we'd be grateful for contributions. So that's the end of the BAMSA overview, and now perhaps there's time for a couple of questions. Miriam, over to you.
Hi. Hello, you can all see me and hear me. Thank you, Sam. So there's been a couple of questions coming in on the chat, but the first one was, that started off a subsequent debate, was why is Mindsport useful conceptually? And that was from Tim Reith.
Okay, well, framing Mindsport helps it to be perceived as having a better status. I think it makes people think more about the sport-like aspects of bridge, and it points to the wider kind of social, health and cognitive benefits. So we within our community might use the word game readily, but sometimes that word can be trivialized by others, and then they overlook the serious aspects of it. So using the word Mindsport, at the very least, it makes people stop and think, but it's not yet a term that's widely used in either academia or wider society yet.
Thank you. No, so I think that also you tapped on the idea of game, and that was picked up in the chat as well. That said, is game the difference between how people might play in a club, that they might like to refer to bridge as a game rather than a mind sport? So is there a difference between, say, at mind sport at elite level and a game at club and social level?
Yeah, I mean, there's different typologies of bridge players. David Scott may touch on this when he comes to do his panel discussion later. But as I said, I don't think it really matters what we within our bridge community use, whether we use the word game or whether we use the word mind sport. What's important is when we're trying to engage with people who are outside our bridge community, and when we're trying to get bridge taken a bit more seriously and to get it to have a similar kind of status as physical sports. If we want mind sports to be taken seriously, I think we then need to use that term when we're talking with either research funders or policymakers or broader, people that we're trying to get to play the game. But it does depend. I do think it does depend on who we're talking to, when we're talking to them, in the particular context. So I don't think it's something that should be a word used instead of game. I think we can use both at different times and different places. But I do think probably there may be more questions, but we can try and answer them via the chat, or we'll answer them in our conference report. I'm just watching the time there, and I think we might move on to our next speaker, which is Dr. David Scott from Sport and Exercise Sciences. He's from Abertay University in Scotland. So, David.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Thank you for inviting me to give this talk today, and thank you everyone for coming along. So this talk is based on a paper that myself and Sam are currently writing, which will hopefully be completed this summer, but it does mean that there are a few possible directions that could still be taken with it. So if you do have any thoughts or comments at the end, then please do share them with us. Having said that, please do also keep in mind that I have come to this with about as little knowledge of bridge as is humanly possible, which will become entirely evident during the panel discussion later on, I'm sure. So, despite the widespread popularity of bridge and other mind sports, they are typically characterised by this lack of physical skill and input within the playing of them. So as such, there is debate as to the legitimisation of mind sports in relation to more traditionally accepted versions of sports, which involve these more outwardly obvious notions of physicality. So in other words, playing bridge in comparison with playing football or rugby or hockey, it differs significantly in terms of these externally visible signs of physical exertion involved in playing these other sports at first glance. So while these debates about what counts as a sport tend to be philosophical in their nature, there's also practical repercussions of mind sports not being recognised as these more kind of traditional sports as well, with the main one probably being a lack of access to funding. So it could be argued that this lack of recognition as a sport is holding back the potential impact of bridge in wider society. However, such a comparison between mind sports and more traditional forms of sports might be interrogated further by using a more sociological perspective of what physicality is, which is what I would like to focus on. So as a starting point, it's worth noting that such a distinction of physicality as being separate from the mind, as is the case when it comes to excluding mind sports, indicates an adoption of what's known as the Cartesian dualism of mind and body being split entities. So this is curious, considering that within modern day sport and society, this argument of the mind and body being completely separate entities is increasingly facile, with modern day medicine and practices such as yoga being quite obvious and clear-cut examples where the mind and the body are incorporated as this singular intertwined entity. So this prompts a question that if societal understandings of the mind and body as being this reciprocal entity are being increasingly accepted, then why has this not been taken into consideration when it comes to defining sports? So the question might be reframed as such: if our understanding of physicality is more inclusive of this mind-body nexus, then are we misunderstanding the physicality of mind sports such as bridge? So in order to try and answer these questions, I'm going to have to get a bit theoretical, I'm afraid, although thankfully for you, I don't have enough time to go into these in any detail. So what is important to remember though is that bridge and mind sports don't exist in a vacuum. So those that play bridge do so within a wider personal, social and cultural context of their everyday lives, which is something that has already started to be investigated, such as by my professorial namesake David Scott at Texas A&M, as well as Sam, Miriam, Zoe and others at the BAMSA team. So an approach that could help to include more physical aspects of the bridge world is that of sociological phenomenology, which, as the name suggests, is rooted within phenomenological understandings of the body and the world. Now is a challenge of trying to explain phenomenology in a concise way, practically impossible. However, phenomenological philosophy has various schools of thought which overlap one another, but sociological phenomenology has its roots within the writings of Alfred Schutz, who emphasises the ways in which individuals interact with various social and cultural structures on an everyday basis. Maurice Merleau-Ponty extends this notion by forefronting the body as being the means of perception of how we perceive the world that we live in an active sense, with the body being described as lived. So this refers to how the individual is both influenced by and reciprocally influences the world that we engage and interact with on a constant basis. So by employing this perspective, I'm hoping to bring the sweat back in to exploring bridge through a focus on individuals' embodied senses and emotions. So this will be done in the paper by employing various phenomenologically informed analyses. Again, I don't have enough time to go through these today, so instead I'm just going to focus on one of these, which is confidence. So this is not only because it's something that I've written about before in my own work, and I'm hugely egotistical, so I want to talk about my own work, being a typical academic, but it's also something which came up an awful lot in the data whilst I was analysing it. So even though we've all heard of confidence and have a general understanding of what it means, each of us understand confidence in our own way, based upon our own experiences of confidence throughout our lives, meaning that it's actually a highly individualised concept, despite this generalised use of a term throughout society. So in my previous work, confidence was identified as being experienced in two key ways. So as a frame, which refers to the individual interpretation and meaning-making processes of emotional experiences within a given social context in relation to other people and the situation, as well as through the body, which relates to this embodied feeling of comfort or discomfort within a particular social environment. So there are two common themes from the data that I really wanted to draw upon today, and one of them, rather unsurprisingly, is confidence. So this is a really interesting element of the data, as it came out in people's experiences both as a frame and through the body concurrently, as well as being in relation to the self, to other people, and sorry, I'm distracted by my dog barking in the background. I knew this would happen. As well as being in relation to the self, to others, and the situation they were in. Again, all at the same time. So this alludes to a really complex and interrelated number of influences upon how an individual experiences confidence during the tournament, both while at the table playing and away from it. With it being a partnership game, in opposition to another partnership, it's impossible to isolate individual feelings of confidence without them being constantly framed in relation to the perception of others, and most frequently to the ability of others. So ability is often referred to in a factual manner during the interviews, particularly when comparing the ability of one player to another or one partnership to another. And this reflects the individual's confidence that they have regarding their own ability, the ability of others, and their perceived ability within their present environment. So this quote is quite apposite in reflecting these different elements, with the perception of partners' playing abilities fundamentally altering the confidence felt within a competitive situation, which also fed into their physical consciousness and reactions. So in other words, bridge players' confidence is bound up within not only perceptions of their own ability, but the abilities of others, and this translates into differing bodily practices while in different situations. The situational aspect is also a strong aspect which comes through in the data, and how it ties in together with this relational aspect to other people and how it emphasised different sensorial and bodily aspects, which is represented with this next quote. So the individual sense of confidence is tinged by the occasion, with the fact that it is an occasion which means something to them being exacerbated by the attendance of these top names. So add into this the fact that they're having to wear this penguin suit, as they call it. They talk about the heat of the room as well. You can also almost begin to feel the stuffiness that they experience during this moment, and perhaps have that feeling of nervousness and butterflies in your own stomach. So all of this points towards a physical performance being enacted, with the individual's sense of confidence in relation to themselves, to the other people, and the situation influencing how that physical performance was enacted. So another key theme I'd like to discuss here is the sensation of time that players felt while competing. So while time itself appears quite frequently throughout the data, such as in relation to practice, to travelling for different competitions, and the stamina involved in competitions, one particularly relevant component, which I would argue links into this aspect of physicality, is the speed of play while at the table. So this seemed to be quite a provocative topic within the interviews, with quite a few examples where arguments erupted both within and between partnerships regarding the speed of play. So again, the situation can play a big role in this, as seen by this first quote, whereby being conscious of the social cultural environment has an impact on their speed of play, with the physical feeling of stress being the key influence upon this. So similarly, this second quote relates to this situation too, but it has the reverse effect of speeding up their play. So again, you can almost feel their sense of being harried and harassed and panicked due to the situation that they are in. And again, similar to confidence, it can be a relational feeling. So there are many comments, such as this one on the screen, which referred to the speed of others' play, which had an embodied effect upon the individual. So for instance, this individual felt drained because of the slow play or perceived slow play of the opposition. So the reference to tempo in playing is also quite interesting and alludes to ideas such as feeling in the zone or in a flow state, which is when you're feeling and playing at your peak and have a sense of both the game slowing down and going by in a blur simultaneously, which is a possible area to explore further in the future. So to conclude, it can be seen that bridge might be understood even as being more physical than first thought. There are more traditional notions of this kind of explicit physicality also expressed in the data, so mainly in relation to stamina in a tournament, getting enough sleep or downtime, and even actions such as how the cards are put down physically or coughing at the table. However, by applying this sociological phenomenological lens, I feel as though it's uncovered some more sensorial and embodied elements of the physical nature of bridge. And while this might provide a fresh insight into the physicality of bridge and other mind sports, it's important to be realistic regarding the impact of these results. Are they really going to persuade those who are already against the inclusion of mind sports within the traditional realm of sports to change their minds? That's not for me to say, and probably leads quite nicely into the panel discussions, but hopefully these findings do provoke some kind of reflection about how we understand physicality and the potential contribution mind sports can have within society. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you again for inviting me to give my talk. I'm more than happy to answer any questions now or further down the line as well. Please do get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. That was great. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. Zoe, as you're on the panel, would you like to direct your question to David? You can just put your mic on and ask him yourself.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, David. That was really interesting presentation there. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how the theory you used, so the sociology of phenomenology, how does that make sense of the physicality of emotion, so the experience of that emotion physically, and then how individuals would then understand that experience?
I'm glad someone has asked about the theory straight away, because when I first wrote this presentation, it took about 30 minutes long, just because I was trying to explain all the theory. So thank you for that. So it kind of goes back to this starting point of understanding the mind and body being intertwined and the fact that they are inseparable. So phenomenology itself starts from this point of view that the mind, the body and the world are inseparable. You cannot look at one aspect of this without regarding the other. And so this is where things like what we would more traditionally kind of siphon off as being part of the mind, such as emotions or logic or rational thought, or the kind of skills that are employed at the table at bridge, can't be separated from being part of our physical world and part of the social environment as well. So it's really that start point from phenomenology itself where that ties in, I would suggest. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't want to obviously go down too much of a phenomenological rabbit hole.
No, that was helpful. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
And Miriam, I think you had a question too.
Yeah, hi, thanks, David. That was a really engaging presentation. I'm sorry, my voice is a little funny, I've got a cold, but what struck me when I was listening to the phenomenological discussions, and this is often a critique aimed at phenomenology, is very good at disrupting that mind-body dualism, but a little less good at tying down the kind of situated experiences, and I wanted to ask you one about gender. So I wanted in particular, because this will tie into later discussions that we're going to have in the panel around gender, about how does gender play a role in experiences of confidence through this phenomenological framework, if that's not a terrible question.
No, that's an excellent question, and it's something that this is probably going to paint me in a bad light now. It's something that has been asked about my work previously before as well. So it's something that I'm incredibly aware of, and it absolutely does have a huge role and huge influence because it relates to each individual's own lived experiences of their world, and that is going to be different based on the different sociological characteristics that you have. And so gender, as much as race, as much as disability, is going to play a fundamental foregrounding in those experiences. So it's something that I haven't personally interrogated yet, and it is something I really hope to do in my future work as well. So I feel as though this is me not answering the question by saying I'll look at it in the future, but I'm also highlighting that it is absolutely a fundamental aspect of it. So it's a very worthy question to ask.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We don't yet have other questions from the non-BAMSA team, so I would encourage people to keep typing questions and comments as we go through. So Christina, you had a question. Do you want to pose your question to David?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's just about how relevant are these debates? Are these debates just of interest to academics? You're all just chatting about this kind of thing in your private conversations, or are these relevant debates to the wider bridge world?
Yeah, I think this will come out more during the panel as well. I kind of, again, alluded to it just very briefly during the presentation, that understanding mind sports as separate from more traditional forms of sports has big repercussions. So the key one being funding. So in a UK context, if you are not recognised as a sport, then you won't be able to receive public money, basically. So you need to be recognised by the the non-governmental organisations such as UK Sport, Sport England, Sport Scotland, etc., to be able to receive money for things like training events or even to compete internationally. So not to relate everything back to money, but these debates do feed into those wider organisational aspects as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, David. I think we could take this opportunity just to have a short tea break before we come back with the main panel wider discussion. So we'll take maybe 5 minutes and come back at 5 minutes from now, and we will continue with a panel of 4 speakers who will be joining David. Okay, so now we have 4 people joining Dave. Each of them have pre-recordings on the website, and they're going to be discussing 2 key questions. What are the defining characteristics of a mind sport? And the second question, what are the benefits and downsides of bridge being a mind sport? So first up, we have Professor David Scott from Recreation, Parks and Tourism Services from Texas A&M University in the United States.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by the term mind sport. The name suggests games like bridge are sport-like and can become serious pastimes. I will argue that mind sports are similar to sports in 4 important ways. I will also note one major difference. FYI, I'm borrowing in part from the work of sociologist Harry Edwards. First, sports and mind sports are often highly organized and include non-players who have a stake in the outcome. Stakes can be economic. Sports generates huge amounts of money and communities work hard to attract tournaments. I am unaware of a study that has demonstrated the economic impact of a bridge tournament, but I bet such a study would reveal that bridge is in fact a money maker. Stakes can also be developmental. We promote sports to facilitate what my colleagues call positive youth development. Mind sports can be promoted in a similar way. The benefits of bridge for older adults are well documented, and I don't need to elaborate much on that. However, I don't think it's too far-fetched to envision a future where doctors prescribe to their older patients 6 hours of bridge per week. Second, the separation from the rigors and pressures of daily life are less prevalent in sport and mind sport than they are in games. This is related to the organized nature of the activity and an emphasis on winning. Too often, children burn out prematurely because of adult pressures. This is vividly seen in the 1993 movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. The film documents the stress that parents can inflict on their chess-playing children as they implore them to excel. In both sport and mind sport, success sometimes becomes more important than having fun, relaxing, or nurturing community. Third, sport and mind sports can occur outside the home and with people who may be acquaintances. The serious bridge clubs that I studied took on this quality. Clubs and tournaments allowed serious players to develop and test their abilities with like-minded players, not friends. People who played bridge in homes played socially. So whether it be basketball, bridge, or some other activities pursued at home or with close friends or family are best represented as games rather than sport or mind sport. Finally, and fourth, Harry Edwards noted that in sport, the activity consumes a greater fraction of one's time and attention. This statement is true for the student athletes that I have taught at Texas A&M University. Now, I don't know any bridge player who is single-mindedly devoted to bridge. However, the serious bridge players I studied spent several hours each week playing and analyzing hands. They traveled to out-of-town tournaments. They organized activity and recruited others to their clubs. One player I studied lamented she stopped going to church and keeping a tidy house. So clearly, many people are highly committed to mind sport participation. So there is one major difference between the two. Motor skills are an essential element of sport, and I may come back to that in question and answer, essential. While mental activity is essential to mind sports. Sports combine varying measures of speed, strength, coordination, and stamina. Now, brains count, but raw athleticism is critical or essential for success. Of course, in tournament bridge, players must have physical stamina to maintain their focus. However, success ultimately depends on having the necessary cognitive skills to succeed. In sum, while sport and mind sport are alike, they differ in this one important way. Now, this is what makes the term mind sport all the more useful and intriguing. It shows how some pastimes are similar to sport, but how they are unique in their own right. Thank you.
Thanks, David. That was great. We'll continue with all of the panel before we open up to a general Q&A. So next up is Kim Fraser. She's author of Gaining the Mental Edge at Bridge, a book that was published by Masterpoint Press in 2019, and she's from Australia.
Thanks, Sam, and hi, everyone. I guess I wanted to talk about this from my perspective as a former athlete and now a bridge player. So, but first of all, I'd like to say that many countries have already accepted mind sports like bridge and chess as sport. And those countries that have accepted them have found that to be very important for both funding and recognition purposes. However, in my pre-recorded interview with Sam, I mentioned the three principal areas of any sport, and these have already been alluded to as technical, physical, and mental skills. However, like many sports, bridge is a partnership game, and so players must also develop skills in teamwork and interpersonal skills, particularly if they want to keep their partner. The physical aspects during an event are low. However, physical activity will assist the player with preparation for the event and with maintaining concentration and their stamina throughout the event. So it seems to me that the player who has some physical preparation is more likely to do better than a player who does nothing. Maybe that's correct, maybe that's not, and it would be nice to have some evidence to support that. Other factors might also be considered. For example, an athlete will set goals and objectives in sport to improve their performance. A bridge player who aspires to international representation must also set goals and plan to make their dream a reality. An athlete will analyse and review the techniques that deliver their overall performance in training and competition. Similarly, bridge players will analyse and review the systems, conventions, play of the hand and other aspects that delivered their performance. Both might use a coach to help guide their performance and to help them analyse, although in bridge, it seems to me that this is a lot less prevalent than in the sporting world. And this is one area which could increase over time as bridge becomes more and more recognised as a mind sport. Professor Scott's presentation also discussed social versus serious bridge players, which is identical to sport. If you think of golfers, you have high competitive golf where players compete for thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you have social golfers who go out and think of golf more as an enjoyable walk around the park than an activity or a true sport. So it seems to me that the only distinction between general sport and mind sports like bridge and chess is the actual lack of movement by players during the game. Aside from this, there doesn't seem to me to be very much to distinguish between sport and mind sport. So if we think about the upsides and downsides of bridge as a mind sport, in my book I talked about focus and concentration at the bridge table and the various techniques which can be employed to assist players with maintaining concentration. We know that as we age, our ability to concentrate and focus often diminishes, and medical professionals advocate daily mental activity to assist with combating the effects of ageing on our mental capacity. As David said, perhaps in the future we might have 6 hours of mandated bridge a week to help us with our cognitive skills. Exercising the brain is considered just as important as exercising the body. As bridge is enjoyed by a high percentage of players in the above 50 age bracket, it seems the benefits of bridge as an activity that assists with addressing the risk of declining brain function are enormous, and to me this is the biggest upside of bridge as a mind sport. If we turn our attention to the younger cohort, bridge as a mind sport in schools brings many benefits to its participants, such as increased social interaction with partner and teammates, learning how to communicate, in fact learning a new language, and working with a partner in the acquisition of the many skills which are required to become proficient at our game. The points made by presenters in this regard provide strong support for bridge as a mind sport, delivering many benefits to the community at large. It's hard to see any downsides of classifying bridge as a mind sport, to me, and I think that if we focus too much on the name of a mind sport versus game, I think we're losing sight of the end product, which is a wonderful game that everyone loves to play and which is totally addictive, and which I'm really pleased that I started playing again in the early 2000s. Thank you everyone, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Thanks, Kim. That was great. Now over to Israel. We have Dr. Liat Hen-Herbst from Health Sciences, the University of Ariel. Liat is here with, I think, some of her colleagues who also have a pre-recording on the website. So Liat, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to join the conference and especially this panel. We would like to contribute to this discussion some aspects that are based on our profession and that uses occupations and activities as a goal, but also as a treatment medium. One of the most important tools of occupational therapists, and all four of us are occupational therapists, is the ability to analyze activities. Through this deep analysis, we come to understand how rich occupations can be, and for the current case, we understand how rich bridge is. Using our profession tools, we have just started in the current study that we did to look at the performance skills and performance patterns among Israeli bridge players, and started to investigate mind sport demands. We think that occupational therapists have the knowledge, the ability, and the tools that might help to define characteristics of mind sports, and specifically bridge, and even go beyond analyzing the activity and to understand what it means for a person engaging in bridge and how and where it's performed by players. So, thank you all.
That's great. Thank you, Liat and your team. David Scott from Scotland, we're back to you to see if you've got anything to add to what's been said so far.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So, I mean, hopefully my presentation helped to highlight how these lines between mind and body might actually be more blurred and liminal, to use a term that Ian McIntosh uses in his recorded presentation, than first thought. And this is not only with regards to mind sports being more physical than perhaps first thought, but the reverse is also true. So what more physical sports have just as much strategy, tactics, and these cognitive skills involved in them as physical. So this kind of separation of mind and body, I think, is less. It's more kind of disingenuous than perhaps we first kind of give credit for. Moving on to the second question. I want to do that kind of asshole academic-y thing of answering a question with another question. So when it comes to what are the benefits of classifying bridge as a mind sport, I would ask the question, for what purpose? From whose perspective? So why is this an important question to ask, and for whom? So again, I kind of alluded in one of the questions, in one of the answers to the questions, that perhaps this is to do with funding. So if we are being classed as a sport by, again, in the UK context, by a non-governmental organisation, then we'll have access to funding in that way. But if not, then in a sense, what does it even matter? And yeah, I'll end on that one, and hopefully it will prompt a few more discussions.
Great, thank you, David. And Zoe Russell now from the BAMSA team from the University of Stirling.
Thanks, Sam. I think just to pick up on some of the things that have been said already, from an academic perspective, I think what's important to sort of emphasise here is that a lot of the time we do reproduce these kind of dichotomies between mind and body, sports, not sports, and a lot of that does need to be broken down. And so I think in trying to, characterise what a mind sport is, that's essentially, the benefits of that is to show that, these dichotomies don't really stand up to how things actually are in practice, and so that's one of the main benefits. I think conversely, and almost on the same basis as that could be one of the downsides, is that if we talk at large about mind sports, are we then reproducing that dichotomy by using the term mind sport versus sports? And I think, as David touched on there, it depends on for whom we are defining mind sport. So I can see it being particularly useful in some contexts, in the case of arguing for funding, and really for pushing the study and research of mind sports. But then on the other hand, we need to be careful that we don't then build those walls up and reproduce those kind of binaries.
Okay, great. Thank you, Zoe. So we have time for a Q&A that relates specifically to these couple of questions around the defining characteristics of mind sport and the benefits and downsides of bridge being a mind sport or not. So I'm just going to pull out some of the questions that have been coming in. We had an interesting question from David Jackson, who says that athletes tell us the difference between good and winning is 90% the mental side, and bridge players now telling us that the key to winning is being prepared on the physical side. So I think that's kind of an interesting observation there, that the physical sports want to emphasize the mental aspect, and now bridge as a mind sport is emphasizing that there's physical aspects. I don't know if any of you on the panel have any comment on that. If I could maybe remind you that if you would like to comment, if you just maybe raise your hand so that, or just unmute and come in. Yes, Zoe?
I think following on from what I was just saying before, I think what this shows is that actually what we're talking about here is a kind of continuum of activity. And so what we should really be thinking about is kind of degrees of physicality or, you know, mental techniques and strategies, things that Kim emphasizes in her book, for example. So, you know, we're never just talking about one or the other, but sort of degrees of mental and physical at all times.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll keep going through the questions, but David, if you want to come in there? Yep.
I just wanted to kind of build upon that and say that it's worth recognizing that this has always been the case as well. In pretty much all sport, it's always been a combination of both the physical and the mental. It's just more recent kind of discourse and acknowledgement of more physical sports acknowledging the mental side of things, and vice versa, has just come to light more recently. But historically speaking, that combination, that continuum, as Zoe said, has always been there, and it's just worth recognizing that, I feel.
Okay, great. Yeah, the other David, Scott.
There's a legal side to this, at least in the United States. In case of golf, the Supreme Court ruled, it was about 20 years ago, in favor of Casey Martin, who had a bad impairment. It was a circulatory condition that made it very painful for him to walk on Professional Golf Association tours. And Professional Golf Association says, well, it's absolutely necessary for you to walk. Golfing is essential, and that was the word, an essential activity that you have to do during golf tournaments. And Casey Martin sued the PGA. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. And ultimately, and interestingly, the PGA ruled in favor of Casey Martin. They said, no, shot making is essential to golf. Walking is inessential. So he was able to use a cart. So yeah, there is this continuum of skills that you must need. But sometimes courts of law will suggest that there are essential activities in one activity or another.
Yeah, we've also had a question coming in relation to esports, the fact that esports have had quite a lot of recognition, perhaps more so than mind sport. I don't know if any of you have anything to say in relation to that.
I think if I can chip in here, I think esports probably have a bit more of a sexy look about them than a bunch of people sitting around a table playing cards, or a couple of people sitting at a table playing chess. So I think that, you know, when you look at esports, it's sort of more modern and it's captured the youth market, and there's a lot of funding available for it. There's a lot of prize money, and it's created this really exciting environment with lots of colour. And when you think of the video games aspect of esports, it's very dynamic. And if you compare that to bridge or chess, you know, we're kind of on the more staid end of the spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, David.
But
yeah,
sorry,
I would
say,
agree with that, and
yeah.
I was going to talk a little bit about that. I think bridge has a lot in common with some of these esports and other video games, and that may raise hackles, but I was going to talk about that in my upcoming comments.
Okay, great. We had an earlier question from Lona Builder, and I think possibly this is more directed at the other David Scott, the confidence David Scott from Scotland, working in Scotland. She asks about the significance of the partnership and the team, together with the issue of time constraint and the constraint of expressing emotions during, after and before play. And she says that psychodynamics talk about splitting as a phenomena in sports, where you get less prone to controlling emotions because of the performance and time pressure. And she said that splitting may become less outspoken if the team confidence is high, according to psychodynamics. I don't know if you have any comments in relation to that.
Yeah, that's a lot of different influences to take on board, and I mean it's funny because that actually combines the paper that yourself and Zoe wrote about confidence, but it also links into Kim's work as well, as far as I understood from the recorded presentation. Yeah, again, it's quite a lot to take on board. There's obviously so many different influences upon the confidence and how, again, that gets translated into a physical performance and a physical act whilst playing bridge. So it's not just about the individual's own self-confidence in their own ability, but their ability in the partnership with the playing partner, the partners opposite them in relation to them, but also this team element as well, which is something I haven't tapped into too much just yet, but I think it's something that is really interesting, the fact that you are there as a team, and quite often staying in the hotel where you're competing with the other teams as well. So the environment away from the table, the non-competitive environment within the field of play, to use a more regular sporting term, is, again, there's just all these different layers of influences upon it, which are just fascinating to explore. This is obviously my politician answer of not having an actual answer to the question, but again, it's something that I think is a really interesting facet to explore.
Okay, great. The next two questions we have, both from Alison Marr and from Joan Forsyth, I think are sort of a bit interrelated, so I'll ask both of them and then invite you all to comment. So Alison asks, she says, recognizing the connections between physical and mental health, and in the interest of dispelling the negative images of bridge as a sedentary activity, how can this mind sport incorporate more physical activity? So maybe we should just pause there before we go on to Joan's question. So how can mind sport incorporate more physical activity? But while you're thinking of your answer, then I will say what Joan said. She said both English and medical, historic and contemporary literature have long reflected an understanding of the connection and often symbiotic relationship between the mind, the body and disease. As your speaker reflected, many practices such as yoga seek to remedy adverse reactions through mindfulness and exercise. So she wonders if it's totally necessary for the physicality of bridge to be proven, for it to be recognised as a sport, in order for those of us representing MBOs to persuade our policymakers of its undoubted benefits on health and well-being for all generations. So I think the two questions are linked around the sort of physical side of bridge and what can be done. Yeah, David Scott from the US first, I think, got in there.
So I'm not a tournament bridge player. Much of my research focused only partly on tournament bridge, but I do come from a leisure studies background, and many of my colleagues are active recreation programmers. So if I were to try to blend the physical and the mental in bridge, I would do it through something what we used to call elder hustle. I can't remember what it's called anymore, but it would be these programs, maybe for older adults, that would combine bridge and more active living type of exercises. So walking, hiking, and that type of thing. So I would be programming or blending the two. So it wouldn't necessarily be about tournament bridge, though. It would be about playing social bridge with people who were committed to the activity, but it would also include other activities that would complement the mental side to it.
Yeah, great. And I think the other David Scott was wanting to speak as well. And Liat, I can't see you. I don't know if you can put your camera on, because at the moment I can't see you. So I don't know if you want to answer any questions, because if you do, you maybe need to raise your hand electronically if you have that function. So David Scott from Scotland.
Yep. So there was a couple of different points related to that that I wanted to make, which is relating to sitting down is quite often referred to in the exercise and physiology literature as being one of the greatest pandemics that we're facing in terms of tackling the obesity crisis. So too much sedentary behaviour is a real issue which is needed to be tackled. So in terms of proving this physicality of bridge, I think from a pragmatic point of view, in terms of tackling policy, in terms of getting bridge recognised and Mindsports recognised, I think it is a fundamental part of, in terms of getting that official policy recognition, and therefore being able to be used in this way of perhaps challenging these preconceptions of bridge just being this sedentary, unactive game where you're just sitting down playing cards, when there is more to it than that. And I did notice that there was perhaps a tongue-in-cheek comment saying there should be a break after 6 boards where all players do 15 push-ups, which, I mean, I wouldn't be against. But I think perhaps this physical element, I think it was in the first address, saying that exercise is part of what makes bridge good. Sorry, it's part of what Kim mentioned as well in her initial response, that people who train more physically are more likely to have this greater stamina and concentration. I think it should be a fundamental part of the training and the exercise regime for bridge as well. So not necessarily during the competitive playing of it, but built into the practice regimes as well.
Yeah. And Liat, sorry, I can see you now. I don't know if your team do want to contribute to any of this. If you're not one of the panelists, can you write your comment or your question into the chat? So Amaresh, if you can write your question or comment into the chat, we can take it from there. There's too many of you to have everyone putting their mics on when it's in this webinar format. We also, I don't know if Liat was wanting to come in, but we also have a comment from Peter Clinch that's asking about, is bridge only a sport when the communities are composed of elites? So he said, is the fact that duplicate bridge is typically played in communities that mix strata of abilities. So a beginner may easily come across an international player, helping or impeding a definition of bridge as a sport rather than as a pastime. So is bridge, his question is bridge only a sport when the communities are composed of elites? Yep, Kim?
Well, I think you could play that, make that comment about any sport. You know, you look at the tennis players that go and play social tennis down at their local club, or and go and have a glass of wine afterwards, or the people who go and play golf, or who go and go to the local swimming pool and just swim laps for some exercise. It's more of a it's not necessarily, not all sport is a competitive activity. And I think it's the same with bridge. It's perfectly okay to just have a game that you go and play as a social aspect. And maybe the only competitive streak some of the people have playing it is that they want to beat their buddy. You know, they want to beat their rival in the club, if you like. They may not have a huge competitive streak at the elite level, but they just want to beat their friend or the person who beat them last week, or, you know, the local buddy at the club. So I don't think it's really confined to the elite level. I did want to make one little comment when David was talking about confidence, and in my book I talked about comfort zones, and I wondered if David had any thoughts about the parallel between confidence and what we know as comfort zones.
Yeah, thank you for that. I presume you meant me and not the Texas A&M David
Yes.
Scott. So yeah, I think that relates to the more existential aspect to phenomenology, which relates to comfort zones and how, as individuals, in order to experience growth and progress within our lives, we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zones, and that's how we kind of gain confidence within wider situations and environments. And I think essentially it ties into this environment and situational aspect of confidence, and that kind of feeling of comfort or discomfort we might feel within that particular situation. So whether this is probably most kind of relatable to, say, a novice bridge player entering an international tournament for the first time, walking into this international hotel and seeing all these big names, and as the quote that I used in the presentation said, like, you can feel the nervousness almost when you're putting yourself into this position of like the heat of a room and the nervousness of it, and that would be someone obviously outside of their comfort zone, and it would affect their confidence naturally. And so yeah, I think there's many different routes we could take with that, but definitely relates to things like comfort zones.
Yeah, okay, great. And we've had some cheeky comments about with more funding we could have better chairs to play bridge. But also, I mean, we might even consider a standing bridge table section for those of us that would like to stand rather than sit. We wouldn't have to have standing chairs, standing tables for everyone, but I think it would be great to introduce a standing bridge table section. I would be one of the first people there. So anyway, thank you to the panel so far. We are going to move on to our third question that they're going to tackle. I'm aware that other questions have come in and we may well go back to some of them, but for now we'll move on to the third one. And as I said, we will answer some of your questions either in the reports or as we go through with the chat. So the third question, because they tackled two just now, is what is the place of bridge in academia and in society? So they've got a couple of minutes each, and we will go through the same order. So starting with David Scott from Texas A&M.
Thank you. As I noted, I think the notion of mind sport is intriguing and has potential to be an interesting area of inquiry in and of itself. And I do believe it has a place in academia for this very reason. I also think the study of mind sport can be positioned in terms of either leisure studies or sports studies. However, it will be gatekeepers and opinion leaders who ultimately decide whether mind sports will be welcome in one discipline or another, or potentially both. I would say in the United States right now, most people who study sport management and that type of thing are fairly wed to departments of kinesiology and business. And so their focus is very, very different than leisure studies. But the bigger question for me is whether or not the term mind sport has the potential to develop cachet in the minds of academics, lay people, and practitioners. So if this is to happen, I think two things need to happen, and I think you folks are doing that right now. I think BAMSA needs to vigorously demonstrate and publicize the positive benefits of bridge. Of course, there are developmental and health benefits, and you're focusing a lot on those, but there are also economic benefits. And there may be other benefits as well. So I think you need to partner with other scholars beyond sociology to demonstrate how bridge benefits individuals and communities. By doing this, I think you're going to be in a better position to secure grants from private and governmental agencies that see the value and benefit of mind sport activities. Second, I think BAMS should partner with opinion leaders and players from other mind sport activities, including chess, mahjong, and possibly e-games or video games. I realize that probably will raise some hackles, yet these e-games or video games are very much mind sports as you define them. Success requires mental activity and concentration. Physical abilities are relatively unimportant. My point here is that their power in numbers as as participants in these different activities affirm collectively they are in fact mind sport participants, the greater likelihood the term will develop currency in everyday life. And that may result in the general public taking mind sports more seriously and helping academics see the value of your research. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And now over to Kim.
Thanks, Sam and David. So I would have to say I probably struggled with this question. I hadn't really considered it very much before it was posed. But it seems to me that learning bridge and all the complexity associated with the game is like learning a new language. And in this respect, it seems to me that bridge would very much be classed as an academic activity and an academic pursuit rather than a game. But the stigma of being called a game and using cards means it's more likely that bridge will sit in the leisure studies area and people will see it as a leisure activity rather than an academic pursuit. Having said that, given the work of BAMSA and the amount of research that the team is doing into this area, it's clearly got a lot of academic intrigue, and it's quite obvious that the whole debate is really still in its infancy, and I think there's a long way to go there. But how important is it to define a place for bridge on this spectrum? And indeed, how important is it to define whether bridge is in fact a mind sport or a game or anything else? Apart from if you set the funding aspect aside, what does it really matter? It seems to me that bridge itself has so many benefits to offer society. And if we focused on the benefits rather than the name calling, then we would recognise all the cognitive and analytical skills that it gives to younger people through to the social skills that it gives to older people, the economic benefits, as David has pointed out. And if we could change the image of bridge with educators, it seems like we would have a winning formula for progressing bridge worldwide. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim, and over to Liat and your team, as long as you're not having technical problems and can join us. So the question is, what is the place of bridge in academia and in society? I think they have been having some technical issues, so maybe we'll move on to the other David Scott again. But yep, Liat, let us know if you come back. Do let us know in the chat.
So in terms of the first part of this question, where we place mind sports within the academic world, it's quite interesting that it's a debate as to whether it's between leisure studies or sports studies, considering I consider myself to be part of both of those worlds. So I am a lecturer in sport development, so I'm therefore from sports studies, although I would probably class myself as a sports sociologist if I'm going to be picky about it. But I'm also in the world of leisure, so shameless plug, I am the membership officer for the Leisure Studies Association, so please join if you haven't done already. For me, I kind of conceive sports studies as being part of leisure studies. Leisure studies is a very kind of broad church and includes such a wide range of different disciplines, which again is why the association is so good and worth joining. Sorry, I'll stop plugging the association. But I mean, just look at the different journals where you've managed to publish work as BAMSA. Some of those are sport journals, some of those are sociology journals, some of those are leisure journals. It quite clearly has a place in all these different aspects, depending on the focus of the topic. In terms of society, I realise my time's almost up already. I would just want to point out 2 key points, and one of those has already been made actually, in terms of linking bridge into the world of esports, which is significantly on the rise and generating, I mean, ridiculous amounts of money and attention. And there are some quite clear parallels between the two, especially in terms of online bridge, which is, I'm sure, is something you're going to be discussing. I think it's on Wednesday with the digital bridge focus. But there's also the potential to include bridge within wider sport for development activities. So the promotion of sport to tackle and resolve different societal issues. So I'll leave it there for now, but I think there's strong potential for bridge to be included and Mindsports within that area.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Dave. And Zoe?
Thanks, Sam. I think following on slightly from what Kim and David were saying there, I think one of the problems with where bridge fits is not necessarily with bridge itself. I mean, from my perspective as a interdisciplinary sociologist, I think bridge could fit anywhere. I think some of the challenges are around how academia is structured itself. So as David alluded to, we've got different journals which have different expectations about what they will publish in different disciplines. So some of those are more or less conducive to papers about bridge. So I think bridge itself can be applied all across society and academia. It's just we need to then make the case for that to be accepted from the other side, where the kind of the structures of disciplines themselves lie.
Okay, that's great. So we have some questions coming in from the chat. Marek, can you type your question or comment, please? It's not, when we're in this webinar format, it's only the presenters who can speak on the microphone. So we have a comment and a question from Esme Nicholson. She says that she likes the idea of continuum and can see the importance of categorization, classification for funding and prominence, so to speak. But she does wonder whether the term mind sport can act as a turn-off of sorts, especially for certain types of young people who might be more interested in taking up the game of bridge rather than getting involved in a mind sport, because something like mind sport feels more structured. And she just wondered whether that's a concern that anybody else shares. So slightly going back to our previous discussion, but it might be worth commenting on that here. David Scott from Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. And again, I'm going to do the arsehole academic thing again of asking another question. Well, furthering that question, I would say, is and kind of highlighting the point that sport itself can be a turn off for people. So a lot of people, when it comes to, as I've just mentioned, sport for development programs or things like health interventions, people can be put off by sport because a lot of people have really negative experiences of sport from a young age. We have to remember sport is not widely accepted by everyone as being a kind of a nice thing to participate in. So instead, things like physical activity and exercise and health and well-being are the different ways of framing these things. So yes, there are concerns that mind sports might not be particularly appealing to everyone, but the same is also true of sports as a whole.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Marek there is agreeing with your point, David, that whilst we're a team of sociologists, we do need to widen our net and do more interdisciplinary working. As he points out, there's lots of disciplines that are involved in research in bridge, and that is certainly one of BAMS's intentions moving forward, is to do more interdisciplinary research projects and combining perspectives as well as different countries too. So. Amaresh had his question from earlier, which was if archery and shooting can be sport, then bridge can be too. He doesn't know how much more body movement there is in those sports compared with bridge. I don't know if that's one for you, Kim, as a shooting Commonwealth champion. Can you say a bit more about the the similarities or difference between shooting and bridge?
Yeah, well, shooting was always described as the sport for people that couldn't do any other sport. So I think that I'm a bit with Amaresh on this. It's not in the actual competition phase itself, you're not terribly physical, although there is a bit of lifting and musculature involved with the firearm. But certainly, I think that just like in bridge, in shooting, if you were not, if you didn't have some degree of physical fitness going into the event, then as the event progressed, you would tire both physically and mentally. And that's where the benefits of physical preparation for sport comes in. And there's lots of sports where there isn't too much physical activity. You know, you think of bowls. Bowls is classed as a sport, but it's not until you've had a long game of bowls that you realise how much physical exercise there is. All those lunges, rolling the ball down, is actually quite a bit more physical than you might realise. And it's the same, I think, with shooting, and even with bridge. You know, those of us who've played in very large rooms will realise what a sprint it is to go to the toilet and back in time to get back before the next session starts. So at times, so. It can be quite a bit different.
Yeah, and we've had some interesting comments also coming in around the fact that perhaps some bridge players, particularly, well, I don't know why that is particularly, but some expert bridge players, says Kath, don't look like athletes, and there seems to be a strong use of alcohol during some competitive games in Australia. I don't think it's just in Australia. I think certainly having a drink after the game is quite a popular part of the community aspect of coming together to play bridge. But I must admit, I have heard other coaches from other sports being very surprised to hear that when bridge players are at even serious tournaments, that there's any drinking at all that goes on during that week. So I don't know if any of you have any comments in relation to that. Yeah, David Scott from Texas A&M.
My dissertation was on bridge. It was over 30 years ago. And one of the things I absolutely abhorred was smoking in club tournaments. And so it wasn't long ago that these bridge players were actively smoking during their round. So it was not necessarily a sport activity from my perspective back then.
Yeah, and we've had a comment from Jeff, who says, why not have two groupings, physical sports and mind sports? Or are we still quite thinking that the continuum's better than having separate categories?
I think, I think it's a good idea. Why not label them appropriately with mind sports and esports and physical sports? At the end of the day, it comes down to should the government fund these activities? And if you consider the societal and other benefits of playing bridge and the aspects of, it brings older people together, it gives them a warm social environment. There's so many of those benefits that have been well documented. What does it matter if it's a sport or a game? It should still be eligible for funding from governments. And I think that's where it really is disappointing that the governments don't see the vast benefits of bridge to the population as a whole, not just from the point of view of the game, but as David said, the economic benefits of bridge players going to a town and playing a tournament are quite high. Most bridge players quite affluent. They all go out for dinner. They all spend lots of money. They travel, and I think that we would do well to emphasise some of those benefits rather than worrying about whether we're a mind sport or an e-sport or a normal sport.
Yeah, we also have a comment or a question as well coming in from Bill Kubley, that the number of home rubber bridge players is huge and they don't have an interest in tournament bridge. So does anyone want to comment on that, the distinction between rubber bridge played out with the tournament circuit? Yep, David Scott from...
Well, this is my bailiwick. I feel that tournament bridge or elite bridge is really the tip of the iceberg. But that all said, the game of bridge has declined in popularity precipitously over the last 50 to 60 years. And it could be that elite players or tournament bridge will be de facto the type of bridge. It may be that clubs are the only place that people will learn about bridge. And I don't want to digress too much, but when I was growing up, everybody played baseball. I'm 65, everybody my age played baseball. And only in a single generation, there were no kids playing baseball around their neighborhoods or in their yards or with their friends. It was all organized baseball. So the game of baseball quickly became the sport of baseball just because of the very organized nature of the activity. And it could be that that's what's going to happen or is happening with bridge. The sociability of the game and the rubber bridge has declined so much in popularity that tournament bridge, as kind of a mind sport, will be de facto the type of bridge that people know about.
Yeah, and we've had a few comments coming in around coaches. So Luna talked about having a professional mental coach for national teams, and it was just a comment that she said that he monitored their heart rhythm to demonstrate the physicality of bridge and quite a lot of strain on the heart. But Kim, in our interview and in your pre-recording, we talked about a little bit, we touched on the role of coaches. And you said that not many players have coaches and that they might benefit from having one. And I just wondered whether you were thinking of technical coaches or mental coaches, so sort of like sports psychologists or even relationship coaches for a partnership.
Yeah, look, I think all of those are probably helpful. I think a mental coach would probably benefit a team or a country. If they were traveling to a competition, there could be a mental coach there that might help the players overcome disappointments, or if they got off to a poor start in the tournament, they might help them overcome that that down, if you like. There are certainly coaches working at the elite level, but there isn't the same prevalence as there is in sport of coaches working with the individual across the board of bridge. It seems to be very much focused on coaching at the elite level, and I think that was the point I was making. And certainly that in itself seems quite sporadic. I know certainly in my country there are not that many coaches. People will talk to people about their bridge and how they can improve and everything, but in terms of a formalised coaching structure where you have a paid coach who actually works with the team and gives the people targeted objectives to do in a training session and so forth, there really doesn't seem to be quite as much of that. But maybe it's different overseas.
And another thing that we talked about, and Zoe and I have talked about a lot, is the partnership element and the need to perhaps for people to work a bit more on their partnerships. I think you even mentioned you were quite surprised how people chopped and changed so regularly. I don't know whether Zoe, if you want to mention anything about partnerships as a feature of the work that you've been looking at.
I think it's interesting what Kim's saying there as well about the coaches and kind of linking into partnerships, was that we've discussed in one of our papers the role that, for example, the coach can play when you have to negotiate issues around conflict between partners, or dealing with difficult emotions that arise during bridge. And I think that there's a lot of benefits to having a coach in that role that can sort of mediate, help people to manage those kind of partnership dynamics. That's certainly something that's come through strongly in our research anyway.
Yeah, does anyone else have any other comments to add in terms of the partnership component that we might not have already touched on? Okay, so sorry, the questions are disappearing rapidly. So there's a question about ageism, but I think we're going to be picking up probably on ageism on Wednesday, sorry, in the third session. Yeah, I'm sorry, some of my questions have disappeared off the top of my screen and I can't get them back, so sorry about that. I mean, perhaps at this point, we could just ask the panel to give some final reflections in terms of their take-home messages from this session, or further ideas of sort of specific ideas of what future research you think is specifically needed in this area. So maybe we stick to the same order. David Scott from Texas A&M.
I think the main thing is to try to partner or expand the partnerships outside the group that you have right now. My colleague David Scott in Scotland, I assume you were more of a recent participant in the group. That's all for the good. But I think the research needs to be more interdisciplinary. I think you are going to need to be able to document other benefits. I've mentioned economic benefits. It's one of the things I've had to learn the hard way in some of my research here at Texas A&M outside of Bridge. I've been told over and over again, well, that's all fine and good, but what are the economic benefits? How much money is being brought into the community for such and such a enterprise or a park? I think that's a main thing that you're going to need to do. And the other thing is, I think the more you're able to develop those relationships with mind-sport activities, or even sport activities that are like Bridge, the better off you'll be, because I think you'll be able to show the public, policymakers, and maybe most importantly, the funders that this activity or these activities are really worth time and attention in terms of not only studying, but funding.
Yeah, thank you, David. And Kim?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big takeaways is that just like in sport, Bridge has an elite level and it has a social level, and both levels can coexist quite happily. And I don't think it's really that important to worry about, you know, whether you're playing competition bridge or social bridge, because at the end of the day, it's no different to if you play competition golf or social golf, or competition tennis or social tennis. It's really just you're participating in this activity. And I think that one of the best things that we could do would be to try and convince educators and governments on the benefits of Bridge as a game and the benefits that it can deliver to society, both from you know, the social, cognitive and other benefits that it can bring to the young, the social benefits it can bring to older people, and just the general fabulous game that it is, to actually make everyone aware of that. I think that's one of the things that we really ought to be trying to do.
Thanks, Kim. And that relates to a comment from Jose Julio, who said that non-serious bridge is much like other non-serious sport activities. And his question was, though, whether it's the competition factor that does make it a sport. So do you think that matters? I mean, you said it did, you know, there you talked about social bridge and competitive bridge. And he's saying that, you know, is it the competition that makes it, that it has to be a sport? It has to have competition.
I really don't know the answer to that question. You know, I think sport, as I said earlier, is made up of various characteristics: technical, physical, mental, you know, interpersonal, cognitive, and similarly bridge is made up of all of those aspects. The fact that you're not doing anything physical while you're sitting at the table doesn't mean that you don't have to be somewhat physically adept to be able to compete at the highest level.
Yeah, and I mean, interestingly, another comment's come in from Gary Hayes saying that aside from the equipment and location, golf is played by professionals. There's little resemblance to the game played by most amateur golfers. And does the panel think that this golf is reflected in bridge? Yep, David Scott from the US.
Absolutely. Competition and the organized nature of tournament bridge or elite bridge is a distinguishing feature that make it sport-like. And the bridge that you see in people's home is a very, very different animal. So, you know, there's a lot of talk today has been about, you know, partnerships. Well, those ideas about partnerships are inconsequential in social bridge. In fact, a lot of social bridge is designed to make sure that random assignment of partners is going on so you don't get hung up about the outcome. So if we talk about social bridge and elite bridge, they are very, very different animals, often pursued by very, very different people. And what they see are doing is very, very different, and they believe they are playing authentic or a legitimate bridge. The people I studied who were social players said, I do not play tournament bridge. The tournament players say, we do not play social bridge, unless it's just among themselves. They felt that if they played too much social bridge, it would screw up their bridge. So they're very, very different animals. So the tournament bridge that we're talking about, the elite bridge, is very sport-like, and I think it's worthy of the term mind sport.
Okay, thank you, David. And also, I suppose the other thing to remember, though, in tournament bridge, you can have amateurs playing alongside even full-time professionals and playing the same competitions. So that makes bridge sometimes a bit more unique from some other activities. Liat, I don't know if you're still there with us. Can you indicate if you are? If not, we will go back to the other David Scott from Scotland and then Zoe to finish. Is it David Scott? The other David Scott.
Yeah, sure. To kind of build upon those comments, I completely agree to begin with David Scott's initial comment that interdiscipline research is fundamentally necessary in order to kind of bridge this divide between the academic world and linking into the social and policy worlds as well. So we need that wider evidence base if we are to make the case from a more kind of policy perspective that, you know, bridge can have this positive impact within wider society. From a more kind of sport development point of view, any healthy sport needs this really healthy grassroots participation as well as the elite level. So while it is necessary to separate the two out, you can't have one without the other as well, but both need to coexist in order to provide the support for one another. So whether that's funding, whether that's participation levels, whether it's just general interest, it's important not to overlook one or the other, and that both actually are needed mutually to make the other exist as well.
Sorry, Zoe, to finish. Thank you, David.
Yep. Thanks. I think David basically just said what I was probably going to say there as well, and absolutely agree with the point about interdisciplinary research. I think it would be great to see sort of scholars from all different disciplines getting involved in bridge work, economists. I think partly that's, again, a problem of academia, is that we like to separate out our research into these different disciplines. So we've got kind of physical science, social science. So if we could kind of bridge that divide as we're bridging the kind of mind-body with bridge as well, that would be brilliant. And I think that would be really beneficial, both for academia and for bridge. And yeah, I agree with that point about, you know, there are differences between the kind of social and serious bridge, but the two definitely feed into each other. And that grassroots level seems to be really important to kind of spread awareness of the possibilities that bridge exists, both as an activity in general and at that level of mind sport.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panel today. We have a couple of closing slides, but particularly thanks to all of you for sticking very carefully to time and for such an insightful and interesting discussion. I just want to close with saying how you can support BAMSA both this week and beyond. We would really encourage you to share your views using Padlet. Padlet is an electronic comments board. It's available all week. So if you, after a session, you have further thoughts, feedback, ideas, comments, all of it's welcome. Obviously during sessions, but out with sessions, you can use Padlet. So the link will be going into the chat. Do also visit the website, subscribe to our bulletin. We just have updates maybe 3 times a year. We're also hoping for lots of social media activity this week. Do use the hashtag BAMSA 2021. Do also consider joining the Bridge and Mindsport for All Facebook group and follow us on Twitter. The BAMSA work and this conference is taking place because of ongoing generous donations from the Global Bridge community, and that started during the Keep Bridge Alive campaign in 2019. So if you enjoy this conference, do please consider a donation. Keep Bridge Alive was the original name for BAMSA, but we changed that in response to feedback from the Bridge community. You can also support BAMSA by watching our screening of Aces and Knaves. This is a film by Jackie Paré about the good and bad sides of bridge. It covers many themes that we're going to be discussing this week. We also have available on our website a Zoom recording with Zia Mahmood, who discusses the film, and proceeds from the ticket sales will go to support BAMSA's ongoing research. And also we're giving you the heads up that there'll be a conference evaluation form that we'd really appreciate you filling in towards the end of the week. So just to let you know what's happening later today, we have our keynote address on wellbeing and bridge by Professor Martin Seligman, plus a book launch. And tomorrow's first session is on the new bridge different opportunities and challenges during COVID-19 and beyond. And in terms of the rest of the week, so tomorrow we have our conference pairs tournament on Real Bridge. There's still time to register, but please, we need you to register by the end of today if you want to play. You can bring your own partner or we can fix you up with a partner. Everybody's welcome so long as you know how to play duplicate pairs. Afterwards, there'll be a short prize giving for the winning pairs, and we'll move back to teams for that because there'll also be a unique opportunity to have a Q&A with the creator of Real Bridge and the Real Bridge development team. Wednesday's theme, gender, age and intergenerational relations in the bridge community. And also on Wednesday, we have another practical session, which is the Bridge Taster. So if you've never played bridge before, I'm looking at you, David Scott from Scotland. If you've never played, come along and play mini bridge for the first time, again on Real Bridge. And then Thursday, the final day of the conference, focuses on learning, education and development in bridge. And the second session will focus on marketing, and we'll have a conference roundup to finish. So we have a fabulous week ahead. We hope you enjoy it, and thanks very much for your participation.